Hi, I'm Stephen with AlbertaUrbanGarden.ca. It's time to start your seedlings inside for this upcoming season. Starting seedlings at home helps me not only manage my excitement about the upcoming growing season, but it helps save some money as well. On today's episode in the Urban Gardening series, I'm going to go through how I start my seedlings to get a head start on my growing season, and a couple of methods I use to make sure that I'm saving some money in the process as well. In the last installment of the Urban Gardening series, I addressed lighting sources and my preference for using natural light. If you missed that episode, I will put a link in the description below and at the end of this video. The only additional cost of starting your own seedlings indoors, aside from the lighting source, is the cost of pots, seeds, soil, and water. One of the methods that I use in order to keep the costs down is I use recycled pots, I save my own seeds, and I use water that's already been used in, say, my kitchen to wash other vegetables, which essentially brings the cost per seedling down to simply the soil that I use to fill the pots. I get my potting soil and compost for about 50 cents a pot. I do have to get 200 liters in order to reduce the cost through the scale of economy, and I catch the products on clearance at the end of the season. Normally, I'm an advocate of do-it-yourself using free and local resources. However, in this case, I've chosen to actually purchase my potting soil for one main reason. Pests outdoors are managed by the ecosystem themselves. They have predators that keep their populations under control and any damage in the garden to a minimum. Indoors, those same pests can wreak havoc and destroy your investment relatively quickly because there's no natural predators inside. As I've mentioned in the past, the process of shipping and packaging products significantly reduces the concentration of things like fungi and bacteria within that product. The same is true for pests, especially large-bodied pests such as fungus gnats. While shipping, their numbers are significantly reduced. In order to further reduce the chance that I'll have an outbreak in my house, what I do is I actually store these products in my garage that gets very cold in the winter and very hot in the summer, further stressing any populations out that are in the product already. If you anticipate an issue with your potting soil, you can pasteurize the soil before using it. While this is energy intensive, I feel this is one of the cases where compromise may be required in order to meet your overall goal of growing more food for as little as possible. Now that you have your soil, your equipment, and your lighting source, it's time to start seeding. Well, almost. Let's backtrack for a moment to that list that we created in an earlier segment in this series. As I mentioned earlier, finding out your last frost date will help you know when to plant your seedlings. My average last frost date is May 16th. The second piece of information you will need is how far in advance of your last frost date you will need to start your seedlings. The simplest way that I have found is to look on the back of the seed packages. If you don't have one, you can always check the seed starting schedules at the back of books like Square Foot Gardening or on the internet. Often these recommended dates are simply the weeks before your last frost date that you need to start that crop. So it's simply a matter of knowing your last frost date and counting back the number of weeks to figure out when you need to start your seedling. I like to write down even the direct sow seeds in the garden. From now until June, I'll have something to plant on a fairly frequent basis. There are a few crops that you can start at any time, such as herbs, leafy greens, and peppers. Herbs and leafy greens can be started and harvested indoors at any time. I started mine in December after I put up my growing shelf. Peppers can also be started anytime. I usually start my peppers when I get that first itch to grow something. It's usually around Christmas. Peppers can be pruned in order to keep them under control while helping you to develop a large, healthy plant that will produce during the summer. Usually the last day that I will start my peppers is based on the recommendation found in the back of the seed packages. If you wait too long for something like peppers, which are really acclimated to a tropical climate, you may not have enough time in your growing season to harvest a crop before the first frosts. If you are looking on some seed packages, there may be some other recommendations for timing. Some crops, even in Zone 3, can be planted and harvested a number of times throughout the season. Crops like radishes, peas, and carrots can often be planted more than once. On the seed packages of these crops, they will often refer to a schedule, such as every 2 to 4 weeks. I take full advantage of these crops, putting them in areas that are not being used and successively harvesting them. Another odd planting schedule you may see is 2 seasons. Some of the cold hardy crops will have 2 planting dates, one in the spring and another in the fall. I will be making a second list for my second round of plantings for my winter garden. Now that we have a planting schedule, it's time to start your seeds. Seed starting is usually fairly simple. Unlike herbs from part 4 of this series, crops like tomatoes and peppers only really need a few seeds to be planted. I usually do more than one, just in case not all of them germinate. After your seeds germinate, if there's more than one of, say, a pepper or a tomato, it's time to thin them out. I usually wait until they have at least a few sets of their first true leaves. These are easy to identify, as often they are the second set of leaves that you see, and generally look different from the first ones. Thinning seedlings, although probably my least favorite task, is essential. If you leave more than one seedling in a pot, over time they're going to compete with each other, reducing their vigor and size, and maybe impeding your ability to get a good, healthy crop out of at least one of these plants. Thinning is fairly simple. I usually take sharp scissors and remove the smallest or least appealing seedling first, and move up from there until I am left with the largest and healthiest looking seedling. When I water, it's usually when I pick up the plant and it actually feels light. I choose to bottom water at this time. Now, bottom watering is said to encourage deep root development, and I don't actually have any research to support that statement today. However, I do it for a very different reason. Pests and diseases, such as fungus gnats, often get established when the surface of the soil stays too wet for too long. Bottom watering reduces how long that surface soil is saturated, reducing the chances that these pests will get established. In addition, it reduces the leaching of nutrients from the soil, as the water needs to be wicked up instead of draining down. In order to avoid overwatering, I usually start with 2 or 3 centimeters or 1 inch of water in the tray. If it is sucked up in a matter of moments, I'll add another centimeter or 2. I make sure there is a full drying cycle between each watering. Keeping roots soaking wet is not great, and other diseases can get established. I do not usually fertilize my seedlings during the winter. I mix 1 part soilless potting mix with 1 part compost. The potting mix holds the water while allowing free drainage, and the compost feeds my seedlings. I think many of you will be surprised how long you can go without fertilizing your seedlings. I have not needed to rely on any fertilizers indoors for the last 2 growing seasons. If your plants are trying to flower like this pepper plant is, you can let it go. However, you will sacrifice plant vigor and size of your crop later on in the season. I usually remove them if this plant is meant to be used in the garden. If your herbs or leafy greens get a little too large, there's nothing wrong with a little winter snack. If you have any questions about getting your seedlings started or have any problems that you've encountered, feel free to ask questions over on the Alberta Urban Garden Facebook page or in the comment section below.